Sorry, my voice is booming. Okay, welcome everybody. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Town of Waxhaw Board of Commissioners of February 11th, 2020. If you could please stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance, and afterwards remain standing for a brief moment of silence.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Okay, at this time, looking at the adoption of the agenda, any changes to the agenda, any motion to adopt the agenda as is? Can I have a motion to adopt or make amendments?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right, we do have on public comments, we have someone signed up to speak right now, Mr. Edward Elam. Welcome.
Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, to the town commissioners, to the interim town manager, to Melody and the assistant town clerk, and also to the town attorney. I rise to bring attention to the discussion on reinstating the Organizational Advisory Board, the OAB. While we were out campaigning for the election, we discovered a tremendous amount of talent in the town of Waxhaw. They are degrees from every major university in the nation, and they live all over Waxhaw. Some of the most prestigious universities and colleges here in Waxhaw. I'm simply asking, if you do decide to reinstate the OAB, that you search for new blood, individuals who are trained in these types of things, who already have established the kinds of credentials to actually bring about some great results for the town of Waxhaw. People who love Waxhaw, but nobody's really ever asked them to. I was really impressed with the diversity, both male and female, and the various disciplines that we have here in the town. And I just simply wanted to put that out there, that we do not need an old country for old men. We need to invite new talent, skills and services, individuals who also understand and who can help this town move forward in that particular area. So please offer that as a consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Elam. Okay, there are no others signed up for the public comments, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. And do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved. Discussion? So, and a vote to adopt the consent agenda? To approve the consent agenda? So, all in favor?
Aye.
Done. Thank you. We have no recognitions tonight, no presentations, no public hearings. We'll move on to old business. Discussion on reinstating the OAB Organization Advisory Board. And I'll repeat this just for the sake of everybody. The interest has been expressed from some board members of the BOC to consider reinstating the OAB. The OAB was previously instated for 3 years from September 2015 to October 2018. This board was dissolved when the BOC took over responsibilities of OAB. The purpose of the OAB would be to review applications, interview applicants, and make recommendations to the BOC on a slate of candidates for appointment. The BOC then can choose to appoint or to not appoint any of the recommended candidates. On January 28th of this year, the BOC discussed possibility of reinstating the OAB during a work session. At this time, the board wishes to discuss this further to clarify the work plan and rules of procedure going forward. So I'll invite comment from the board? Commissioner?
The only thing that I saw that I would like to see added to the purpose of the board would be to ensure that all boards are up to date on training.
Okay, I'm sorry. Commissioner
I
Lee?
personally don't see why we need this board. The previous board functioned in the role of interviewing candidates for us, screening candidates. We've done that recently. That was 2 hours of interviews, maybe 2 hours of prep time. That's 4 hours twice a year. That's 8 hours a year. And we're saying that's too much work? That we need to have somebody else do it?
Well, I think it's more for recruitment purposes. That does take more time than that. I think it's, as was mentioned by a citizen, actually going out into the public and trying to find the most qualified for the boards and committees.
Is that the intended purpose, or will they be doing these interviews as well?
Well, that was part of their purpose before.
I would like to see that removed if this is brought back so that the interviews remain in the purview of this board. I think we gain a lot from meeting face-to-face with the candidates. I've certainly heard a lot of positivity from the candidates that they appreciate our time to meet with them.
Just to kind of piggyback off what you said, I think we should still, I'm fine with keeping the OAB the way that is expressed, adding your part to it, but I also think we should put a caveat in there that we would also continue to let them present their candidates and let us go through the interviewing process. I think just to state about that, right now we're working for a town manager, we're looking for a town manager, and we are having a recruitment firm kind of doing a lot of this heavy lifting at first. I think there's nothing, based on your opinion or your thought, why shouldn't we do that for the town manager search? Why don't we just vet the town manager people, put an ad out there? I think that by having an OAB adds another layer of vetting candidates and matching what the skills are of the candidates versus with what the needs are of each particular board or committee, which is one of that. In addition, I think it helps to get this board to work to share the vision of our board and to work collectively with all the different groups so they're not working in silos. I mean, I think that's sort of the vision of that, but I would also add the caveat that once they do their initial vetting, that we come back and do like what we did the other night. I don't think us spending 5 minutes with a candidate is really enough time to make sure that they're qualified and have the right skill set to match the needs of what each committee is looking for.
I believe that that's slightly redundant. I think the conversation started with that in mind. If we have an OAB that's functioning and is competent to carry out that task, there's no real need for us to also, and I agree that no, it's not a lot of time, but when you combine it with everything else that's happening, our search for a town manager and other projects that are in the background, I think it does start to increase our time, that we're not focusing on something else that really should take a lot more of our time. So having those folks in place is going to help us to do the rest of the things that we need to do.
So you would prefer not to add a caveat that we continue interviewing?
I would prefer not to.
Just to clarify, you're in favor of reinstating it, but not necessarily with the caveat of
Correct.
holding, because I know they would.
Stating it, adding what Commissioner Wesolek said, as far as the training, I believe that's an ongoing thing, whether they first come on or a year down the road, they might require an update or they might require a refresher. So that's an important thing as far as going on from recruiting them. Because once they're there, they need to be updated and they need to be sort of mentored along to where they can be yet an even more effective member of that committee.
And who will train the trainers? Who will train the OAB?
I would imagine that there's training for the trainers. That those are things that we can contact the UNC, and the training that I got was online, and there was other forms of training that was available to us. So I don't know that that's an issue as far as training a trainer. I think once we have, again, the right people that have been trained, maybe have some experience, I believe that that's going to go a lot smoother. Training's out there, that's not the problem.
As a Commissioner Simpson, as a former member of the OAB board, was there training for you when you were on that board?
Other than the orientation training for all the boards and committees, there was not really any additional training, but if the people that were on the board, if you looked at their skill set, they might have that type of skill set in the private sector that they can transfer over to what that would be here. Similar to when we were out looking for candidates and vetting them and recruiting them. As an example, we spoke with Dina from Parks and Rec, and what she was looking for at the time was people more in the financing or grant writing or things like that, not necessarily the people that we could use down the road, such as the landscaper designs and things like that, because our need right now is in that department was to try to fund the planning and the funding aspect of Parks and Rec. So I think the OAB can do that, to work with our department liaisons to the board as well as the board chairs and find out what other needs, get them to start to work together so they're not in silos, and start to build some interconnectivity and interpersonal rapport between all the boards and committees. Because it takes a lot of time. We know what we're going through right now for the town manager.
So the OAB then would relieve the staff of that portion of it when it comes to recruiting of applicants or recruiting of qualified applicants or trying to find those qualified applicants for the positions that we're looking for on various committees, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yes, but it adds another layer of vetting because the clerk's office handles all the initial applications, and then they would give that out to the OAB, who would contact all the applicants and schedule meetings or interviews, and gives them a better understanding of what the needs of the position or the roles are that we're looking for, and try to match the skills versus what our needs are. It's just another layer, and I just don't think, having 5 minutes with each candidate is really enough. I think we should have another layer of screening in there, which is what the OAB will provide.
So in the other layer of screening, would we then rely on the OAB to do the interviewing, and then we interview as well, or are we just going to be doing the interviewing of candidates?
I think it would work to do both, similar to what we're doing with our town manager search. They can kind of do the initial process, and then, again, the ultimate decision is up to us, and whether we want to do another round robin so we can get a feel and to do that. I think we should at least have that at our disposal if we choose to do that.
I think it would be important that we at least meet face-to-face people we're going to appoint.
Agreed.
Any other comments, additional comments, thoughts? Okay, at this time, it looks like we're looking to decide whether or not we're going to put this back in place, so do I have a motion?
Motion to reinstate the Organization Advisory Board with the addition of the 2 amendments to the purpose of the board?
The two amendments are the training and to include our interview.
I don't know, do we need to put the interview in there?
I think the option maybe.
Okay, can you clarify the motion then?
Before you start, let me suggest that you, instead of saying to reinstate, that you create the OAB.
Does that, about the meeting, their interview need to be in there, or is that just an extra step that we're just making on our own, or does that need to be as part of that?
Well, on that part, whatever you want this board to do, you really ought to be able to have it in writing what it is, not necessarily in writing right now, but I would include.
The purpose the one that I added would be a purpose of the board, but us interviewing is not something for them to do, that's something more for us to do, so
Would that go in rules and procedures for the board?
maybe that's,
I think it clarifies in the rules of procedure where they say they make the recommendation of slate of candidates. I think that.
So the motion then would be to create the board and then write the rules of procedure, and then we approve the rules of procedure with that included.
We currently have the rules of procedure for all this. We would need to amend it to add the couple of caveats.
so motion to create the Organization Advisory Board with the addition of ID, or, I'm sorry, 1D for ensuring training of all boards and committees, and in the rules of procedures that the Board of Commissioners interviews the slate of candidates.
Any other discussion then? Town Attorney, are we okay with the language?
That sounds good to me.
Okay, very good. So should there be no other discussion on it, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Very good. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, next item up is the discussion on rescinding the BOC liaisons policy, and I'm going to read through this as well for clarification. The BOC liaisons policy was adopted by the Board of Commissioners on September 11th, 2018. The stated purpose of the BOC liaisons was to represent the BOC as a whole in a liaison role to a particular committee and facilitate dialogue between the committees and the BOC. With the recent changes to the BOC, discussion has evolved between some members of the board as to whether or not these liaison positions were productive to the growth, development, and expression of any or all of the boards and commissions. We're here tonight again. The BOC had a work session on January 28th, 2020 to discuss the possibility of rescinding the BOC liaisons policy. So again, I'm inviting some more discussion on this.
I'm in favor of rescinding the policy because, again, it seems sort of redundant that we have staff members that serve as the subject matter experts for each of these boards and committees, and I just don't think that we need to be there to add more oversight, or I've had comments from board members that they felt intimidated or didn't feel comfortable enough being able to express or brainstorm on a particular topic because they felt like they were just they didn't feel comfortable doing that. They felt intimidated. I also think if they need to clarify anything, we can work through our staff liaisons. Not that that doesn't mean as citizens that if we had an interest in a topic, we should go, because really, if you look at what the liaisons are, it's not our role really to interject during the meeting.
Commissioner Lee?
I feel that this is approximately 3 hours a month. I don't feel that that is really a hardship for anyone who accepted this job to work. I feel that if there are individuals who feel that they cannot speak in our presence, then that is on us, that we have somehow failed in the selection of those candidates, because we all ask, can you speak in public? Are you confident expressing your ideas? And if they're not, then perhaps they're not the right fit, or perhaps we need to give them more coaching and more training to make them comfortable with that role. I don't think that our presence in the room should be a detriment to anyone. It should be a benefit, because we are, as you say, not speaking. We are observing. And then if something important comes up, we can come back and share it with this body and not wait for an update that may or may not come, that may or may not have the same perspective. We can share that insight with this board and say, here's what I saw, here's what I witnessed. And again, it's 3 hours a month.
Any other comments?
I think coaching and training has not, in my opinion, has nothing to do with intimidation. Someone can be coached, they can be trained, they can know how to speak in public. But if there is someone or something that is intimidating as a factor to them that can, prevent them from stating what they need to state. And that seems to be a little different with intimidation, coaching and training to me.
Commissioner Wesolek?
I actually agree with Commissioner Simpson, and I mean, we're always free to go to any of the meetings if we'd like anyways. They're all open to the public, so.
As a citizen, not as
Right.
as a commissioner, if you're not there. Okay.
That's correct, if you're not there in an official capacity. Commissioner Morey?
I agree with what has just been said. It's redundant in nature, and we still have the option to attend if we so choose.
Okay, very good. I will weigh in a little bit on this as well, is that I did hear a lot of comments from some of those boards and committees that they didn't feel comfortable, for whatever those reasons were, with what they termed as maybe some overreach on some of the direction that was going. It seemed to, in their words, stifle some of their creativity. So I think it's important for us, again, to trust a process that we put in place in restructuring these two boards and positions, and let the people work. So I guess at this time, I'm asking for a motion.
I'll make a motion to rescind the board liaison policy.
Any further discussion? Okay, at this time, we'll ask for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Nay.
Everyone?
Mr.
Motion
Mayor, may I
passes.
make a comment?
Yes, ma'am.
Given the fact that we've just reduced the workload to this board by my back-of-the-napkin math says 20%, I make a motion that we reduce the elected official stipend by a commensurate 20%.
I think we have, what you're saying is by the hours in boards and commissions that you now want to reduce the stipend, but our workload, even without the board's liaisons or even without the organizational advisory board, we are still overseeing what happens with the boards. We still have additional workload and additional responsibilities and things that are coming up that we are working on that are not reducing our workload. We still have obligations to the town of Waxhaw that have us going out on openings, or that have us going out for functions at different businesses or organizations, or traveling when we have to go for meetings. So as far as workload is concerned, this has nothing to do with reducing our workload or our work session time or our hours that we put in that are not clocked by the fact of reducing the organizational advisory board or the board of liaisons, because we still can go to these meetings, we still are overseeing the people, we are still overseeing the boards, we are still meeting with staff, we are still meeting, and we are still working outside of these two committees that have been reduced. So that 20% that you're talking about can be increased by another 40% or 50% on top of what we are doing right now. That isn't clocked.
Commissioner Wesolek?
Well, I know that our workload has been increased probably by at least 20% with the town manager search that we've been doing. I don't know about y'all, but my regular day job, I've had to take off quite a bit for these daytime meetings. So I certainly don't think that by not going to a board or committee meeting requires a 20% decrease in stipend.
In addition to the fact that we have people who are liaisons to CRTPO, we have people who are liaisons to the COG, Central Line Council of Government, we have people who are working with UNC government, we have people who are working with North Carolina League of Municipalities, we have people who are working, who are doing a lot of outside things for the town of Waxhaw that may not be clocked, that may be even some of the people sitting here or who are online do not see, but we are working behind the scenes and we are doing on a daily basis.
I believe we have a motion on the floor.
And some discussion along with it.
Of course.
I spend a great deal of time trying to look at and rebuild things that we have to deal with. I probably spend 70 to 80 hours a week so far in trying to fulfill my role. And certainly this, I've never looked at it as an hourly rate or a percentage rate. I just do the job that I was elected to do. And it does include a great deal of my time and a great deal of time and effort in connecting and communicating with the community, with the Board of Commissioners, with other leadership in the town. I would say that this is going to be able to free us up to spend even more time and more effective time on our use to bring forward the things that we need to bring forward and not be mired down in the work that somebody else should do.
There's a motion on the floor.
Yes, there is. So any
Call
other
a vote.
comments? Okay. At this time, I'd like to roll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion fails. Okay, we have item number 3 on this, on the old business, is discussion on revising the social media policy. And, of course, I'm going to read this again for those who may or may not be familiar with it. The Town of Waxhaw social media policy was adopted by the Board of Commissioners on November 25, 2019, and revised on December 10th, 2019. This policy is applicable to both elected, appointed officials and employees. Several board members have expressed a desire to separate this policy out in two different policies, one for elected, appointed officials and another for employees. On January 28th, the Board of Commissioners discussed the policy during a work session. This board wishes to discuss the policy further with the town attorney present. I'm going to pass this over to Commissioner Simpson.
Thank you, Mayor. During the last quarter of 2019, the Board of Commissioners adopted several transparency policies, which include electronic messaging, cell phone, public records, and a social media policy. The purpose of the social media policy is to define social media, the process for usage, and the rights of the town to use social media with the intention to, 1, preserve public records and personnel confidentiality violations, 2, the technology utilization for the town's communication, 3, appropriate review by communications and social media staff, and finally, protect inappropriate social media content. Upon researching and reviewing other municipalities' social media policies, they focus on the issues of who is allowed to speak or represent the town in communications, defining public records as well as their retention, and which the town of Waxhaw has previously adopted a set of transparency policies to address those issues. In this day and age, we see transpire on social media, both nationally and on the local level, the same stage. These issues become one of accountability. Waxhaw's current social media policy commingles town employees with elected officials. However, elected officials should be held to a higher standard. Consulting with the Society for Human Resources, or SHRM, the U.S. Department of Labor, as well as the Senior Vice President for Randstad, a 60-year-old human resources company operating in 53 companies, employees and elected officials do not share the same job classification category. In addition, the employer-employee relationship, employers, which would be the town, is able to impose rules and regulations for its employees, which would be the staff, to comply with and may terminate them for not doing so. Whereas elected officials, we are not employees of the town and we cannot be fired from our positions because our accountability lies with the community citizens, the voters, and one another. And so I think during reviewing this policy, we asked for some clarification with Wendy, and I think with Attorney Buckley here, maybe we can get a little further clarification.
To me, the first question you ask is, well, we adopted this in the winter. Why didn't we address this at that time? Well, first of all, for two reasons. Number one, when it was my turn to look at it, it was much earlier in the fall. That case that came out last summer dealing with Facebook and all of that social media had just come out, I think it was in June or July. But nevertheless, I was still your interim. I wasn't your town attorney. An interim's job is just to hold the ship balanced as much as possible, but not to create something new. 1st of December, you hired me as your town attorney. At that point, I became a member of the team, not just keeping the ship from pitching too far one way or the other. It is my recommendation, and I'm jumping ahead here because that's not really a discussion, but the portion of this policy that applies to personnel should be under the personnel policy. As you just mentioned, the rules governing employees are totally different than the rules governing members of the elected body or any of your boards, appointed bodies. This needs to be in the personnel policy. It would be my suggestion, and I'm jumping ahead, maybe you have something else to say, but it would definitely be my suggestion as your attorney now, and not as your keep the ship from pitching too far right or left, that you direct staff, including me, and I'd like to work with Wendy on this because I think this is an HR matter. This is not a policy matter, well, personnel policy, but it's more than that. It's an employee rule and regulation. As to the elected officials, I tweaked that last fall when writing and rewriting this a little bit and gave those tweaks to Melody. But I was using that case as a tweaking. but it needs to be more than a tweaking. We really need to delve into this so that you don't get involved with something that will potentially result in some kind of liability on the town because of an improper use of social media. That case dealt with an individual's use of the social media, but remember, in that case, the town was held liable because that it was like an agency situation. That elected official, in effect, brought the town in without meaning to into the lawsuit to pay the damages. So what we want to do is delve into this a little bit more, but you've got to segregate those two policies, make them two separate policies, and deal with it in a way that, one, we minimize the effect on possible liability on the town. You have your own responsibility with your own Facebook pages, but then they fall into the town's Facebook page, which isn't governed by your own responsibility for your page. This Facebook page is definitely a public forum and needs to be treated as a public forum. But not only that Facebook page, but all of your social media accounts need to be treated as a public forum. And now we need to delve into it just one more step. We've tweeted it, but it needs to be delved into so that you don't result in a lawsuit somewhere along the line because of it most inappropriate use of your social media accounts, or the most self-governing it, you stepped over the line somewhere. We need to really be careful with this. And so that's why in your discussion at the end of the last meeting, I said, well, I think they ought to be separated. Should I have said that last fall? Probably. But I didn't know that I was going to be your town attorney either. So, and for that, which I'm indebted to you for that. I'm very much gratitude for that. But now, quote, I'm a part of the team and not just sitting there holding the ship together, like I said. So I think I would highly recommend that you direct staff to work on this policy. One, putting the employee portion under the personnel policies, and the elected, well, the towns under a different set of policy, and really delve into it based on some recent federal cases.
Very good, thank you. Any other comments, please? Commissioner Wesolek.
So, do we completely rescind the policy, or is there a way to separate it between?
Let us bring it to you before you do anything.
Okay.
Right now, there is something in effect. It's not ideal, but there's something in effect. Let's don't have a period of time where there's nothing in effect.
So do you need a motion or a directive to?
Just a directive, I would think.
Directive? Okay, so a directive to.
Do you agree with that, Mr. Manager?
Draft
Yes.
the new
Right.
elected official.
A
I
directive
just made
for,
it work for him,
so we would issue a
I better
directive,
ask if he agrees.
a directive for the town attorney and
Staff.
staff, with the assistance of Wendy Davenport, the HR director, to develop a more effective and efficient
Correct.
employee and commissioner or board of commissioner or elected officials. Elected officials. Aren't they doing both? No, they're just doing the employee? Are you doing the employee and the elected
No,
official?
we're going to tweak the elected official and appointed board members.
Right.
Policy as well.
Right. So the directive would be for the town attorney to tweak the elected official policy, and also for the town attorney to work with the Human Resources Director,
Correct.
Wendy Davenport, to draft or redraft an employee social media policy.
Can you trail that? We got it all? Okay, so
I just have a couple of questions.
you may.
Because the current policy, there's also some language in here that I think needs to be reworked.
Oh, yes. That's what I
And
mean by
so-
tweaking.
Because there's a whole section in here that talks about inappropriate use, and a lot of these items that are listed here is very subjective, so some of these things harming the goodwill or reputation of the town. Who determines that? We need better objective type criteria, because what I think is harming the town versus what somebody else thinks harming the town might be two separate things. And so if you're going to use this particular policy to tweak, I think there's a lot of tweaking that needs to be
Well,
done.
that will be the beginning of it, yes. But see, when I did this tweaking early last fall, there were things in that same section that I recommended to be taken out. And
So with the tweaking and a directive to the town attorney, he will go through, my understanding, the existing policy that we do have, to then come back with a draft to the board.
Correct.
For the board then to review, and upon that review, if there are additional questions or concerns, that they will then be addressed, and then we can ask or question, and then move forward with how we want it to continue to look.
The other question too, do we necessarily need a social media policy for the board and for the appointed boards? Because wouldn't those be, if we want to talk about accountability and hold each other accountable for our behavior on social media or what gets posted, is that something that we need a policy for? Or would that be covered in our rules of procedure, code of conduct, and ethics policy? Because a lot of these social media policies that towns developed was really more for public records, and deciding who gets to speak on behalf of the town as a representative, as opposed to really delving into some of the content issues that are listed in this policy. And if we're going to talk about a post or something, shouldn't we be holding each other accountable with the tools that we already have, such as a code of conduct, rules of procedure, and ethics policy?
Well-
Do we need to really have something so black and white, or a policy per se, just for elected officials and appointed boards and committees?
Well, it would be a policy for the elected officials and appointed boards, yes. But what you're talking about here, they would have, everybody has a responsibility for their own media. What we're talking about is the town's media. For instance, the town's Facebook page, or the Twitter account, or the
YouTube.
yeah, the YouTube. So what we need to make sure is there is no difference in my mind between the appointed officials and the elected officials. Both of your uses of the social media needs to be in concert with each other.
So it's about protecting the town from liability.
It's about protecting the town, correct.
I think I'm okay. My concern, and I think Commissioner Wesolek shares that, is the freedom of speech.
Well, I understand that. But let me give you an illustration. Somebody posts something on the town's Facebook page. You just don't like it. Can you block it? So, I mean, that's the type of thing we're looking at. We're not asking, I mean, this policy won't govern how you use your own social media.
Well, I think there's a lot of language in this current policy that could be utilized to say, you posted this on your Facebook page, I'm not happy, it's inflammatory, it's hurting the reputation of the town and the goodwill.
Well,
And so
see,
I think, I just want to be sure that this won't be an instrument used.
there's probably nothing that's so odious that you can use that to block something about a comment about the town or things. What you need to do is make sure that you can block illegal activity, or hide. The word hide would be better. Or nudity. Somebody sends something in on it that has nudity on it, something like that. We're not talking about somebody says, well, that board's a flippity-floppity, flippity-floppity. Well, that's what you know, when you took your oath, you accepted the responsibility of receiving the public comment, whether you like it or not, whether it hurts or not. That's your duty to absorb that. Because if you don't absorb it and you try to then do something to knock that down, then you've just interfered with the freedom of expression of the person in the public who sent it. So it's a real sensitive thing here, but at the same time, when we are protecting the town, we're also protecting the First Amendment rights of the citizens who want to use your social media.
I think what you're looking for is just a separation or clarification of words of it being an official town page or your personal page, as far as the,
No, she's looking for clarification on the words freedom of speech and how to use a social media policy and how it's going to be drafted, is my understanding. And under the directive, if you are directing the town attorney to review and/or go through the policy, the current policy, and to bring back an additional policy, I think that the town attorney is understanding of what's being said and being asked for him to do, that we allow him then to do his job and bring that information back to us so that then it can be reviewed, so that we can see what's going in there, and that we, as the board, will have the opportunity to question, redraft, or, cancel that totally. So I'm pretty sure that Mr. Buckley is understanding of what's going on, and he's not going to just come back, and paraphrase what's already in there, but that he gets the gist of exactly what's being said and what's being asked of him, and that we allow him to do his job.
I agree, and maybe I'm getting the cart before the horse, so
I think so.
I think
Right.
if we just,
And let me just say, don't repeal what you have, because what you have is not illegal. I would have caught that before, even as an interim. It's just not ideal. It doesn't really do the job that it should do, and it certainly doesn't do the job for employees. Your town manager has more of authority over those employees, and that's where that policy should come under the town manager. That's your personnel policy. This should be incorporated into that. The public holds you accountable, but their recourse is the ballot box. They're not going to hire or fire you. They're going to vote one way or the other every 2 years or every 4 years, depending on your term. But at the same time, that's the majority, the major reason to me is to just get these things separated and then work on both of them and incorporate the one into the personnel policy.
Okay, I think we probably
I
beat
think
that
we
up pretty good.
Beat it
but,
pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. So what I'm seeing here is we probably have a consensus to direct the town attorney and town manager to create this policy and bring it forward to us at a later date.
The Human Resources Director, Wendy Davenport.
Yes, thank you. So we're all in favor of that? Everybody up? Okay. All right, I guess we can move on to new business. No new business tonight, so we do have somebody signed up under the general public comments, Mr. Edwin Elam. Welcome back.
Protocol having already been established, I would like to ask the question as to how we do have town employees that have used the social media for their own personal attacks in the Waxhaw Police Department, namely Chief Ice, who has taken a picture during the election campaign with my campaign sign in there, which actually caused an arrest of a gentleman who is now out. So either they were idiots when they actually went in to do the work, or that they didn't have anything in the first place, is kind of it's really appalling to me that we have people that are using the social media who are employed individuals for the town of Waxhaw, badgering citizens and using as personal vendettas because of those individuals that have that they support more than the chair.
Okay, I'm going to slow you down just a little bit. I want to keep this productive and reverent to the people who are here, so no name calling.
Well, we all know the two individuals who have actually utilized their offices to attack a citizen for the outcome of the election, which I think was very, very egregious, and it needs to be addressed by this body, and we really need to establish who actually is running this town as opposed to those individuals who are actually thinking that they're above the law.
Just want to make sure that we're clear. Just my point is no name calling.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Well,
I appreciate your
we're
comment.
clear. We're clear, Mr. Mayor. But I do think it is egregious, and I think that needs to be addressed by this body, and I think everybody knows the infraction that was done from a standpoint, if it was even called back, that it was out of order. It was, even over this weekend, an individual who is on town salary utilized social media to make a very, very unique attack on this individual. And I think there's enough pattern of items that I have documented that actually need to be looked at by this body and any other agency that we can get a decent, disinterested third party to look at that shows continuous egregious items by that department. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, sir. All right, there's no one else to sign up to speak, so we'll go to the town leadership reports. Matt, are you up first?
Thank you. Good evening.
Welcome.
So I have a number of minor details to add, just for an update of some information. I think Erskine passed on to me that you had some questions about the stoplight at Kensington and Waxhaw Marvin Road. This might be a little anticlimactic because the information we had on file, the signal plan was from 2014, and I anticipated being able to get the new signal plan in time for tonight, but I'll probably have to come back for that item. DOT didn't have it at their immediate disposal and hadn't gotten it to me yet. The point was to try and show what the left turn movements are going to be when the new signal comes live, which it hopefully will come live this weekend. What the 2014 shows is that Waxhaw Marvin will have a protected left, not Waxhaw Marvin, Kensington Drive will have a protected left turn signal, which is the green arrow. But Waxhaw Marvin, at least according to this plan, is only to have a permitted left, which is the green ball. And because I really expect that there's probably an update to that, I would really wanted to have the updated plan, but I didn't have that in time, so I probably should have just pulled this all together. But for the sake of transparency, and we already provided it to you, I wanted to go ahead and discuss through that. And if there are any other questions that I can answer about the intersection now, I'd be happy to take those.
Any questions from anybody?
Apologize for that one.
Move on to the next one.
Okay, just an update, the open house we were going to have for the Master Transportation Plan public engagement session last Thursday was rescheduled due to the storm event that we had. In the interest of safety, we didn't want anybody coming out here in that, and so we rescheduled that to Thursday, the 20th of this month, in this location from 5:30 to 7. The survey we have online for those that are unable to attend the open house is on the web page, front and center. The minute you go to waxhaw.com, it'll be there, and you can click on that and take that. And anybody, really, I'd urge anybody in the county to go ahead and take that and give us your input on your concerns with traffic and what we're proposing to come out of the Master Transportation Plan to make sure that all our expectations and we're getting the public's input as we put that together for a really solid document. And then finally, I did add some information which I think might be useful to help maybe get ahead of a potential issue. Bivens Street between Broome Street and Church Street is a private road, and Ardmore informed me that they're planning to close that road before they open their facility, those apartments. And this was not on the town plans that were submitted, it was on the DOT off-site improvement plans, so I was not aware of it. But now being aware of it, I imagine it's going to cause some concern when that is not able to be utilized. And so I wanted to make sure that the board knew and that the public is aware that because it's a private street, we can't control the authority of it. And so if they so desire to close that street, then that's what they're able to do.
Has there been any discussion with the two property owners on either side for some type of remedy, future use?
Yeah, one of the property owners is considering already putting a development on the south side that may go right to the center line of that road. That's some time off. No plans have been created or submitted. So I think there is an opportunity to get with Ardmore and say, hey, if you can hold off on closing it, that might be in the interests of the public and certainly the board if that's your discretion. We would have to work with DOT in that because it will affect the turning movements when the new trips are generated from that site. It could possibly back up traffic if you're trying to go north and turn left onto Bivens and you're waiting for traffic to clear going south, you could back it up. And so I think there's care needs to be taken, and we'll kind of consider everything in the scheme of things. I think bring DOT on board with Ardmore and whatever the wishes of the board or the public may be to make sure that it's as smooth and kind of effortless as possible as we continue to transition that area.
So if I remember right, the apartment ownership, or at least that partnership, is also represented in the parcel to the south of that center line. The two of the same, or at least the related ownerships.
Yeah, so the original property of that Armour's one and then property across the street directly, the triangle piece is sometimes referred to, there are consistencies in who controls those. There is not to the south of Bivens. That's a different entity altogether.
Will not resolving this or not being able to resolve this, will this affect the COs on the apartment buildings?
No, this was a part of the agreement with DOT for the off-site improvements to close it. And so that's what they're doing. That's why they're doing it, to meet DOT's requirements.
Okay. And how long ago was this? It was a vacation at that time? When they vacated the roadway, made it private? Wasn't it a street before?
I'm not aware that it was ever a street, no.
Okay, so it's just a paper street.
Well,
It was private.
Private, right, private, and it's been used certainly by the public, and no one's,
Nobody
made any
brought it
question,
forward.
but it's not on our list of maintenance, and DOT doesn't maintain it. The properties go to the center line of that road.
So in effect, they could close it off.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Any other questions on that portion?
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Matt. Next up, we're looking at Kurt. Good evening.
Hey, good evening. Okay, so I've got an update on 2 grant projects tonight. The first one is the Waxhaw Marvin Sidewalk. So this is a project that began January 2018, and we actually it's completed. So this is great news. It's actually was sidewalk and driveway aprons. I believe 9 or 10 driveway aprons there, and so it's really definitely a big improvement. Now you may be wondering, why did a sidewalk take 2 years? And that's what we'll get to, because while this is great news, I also wanted to share some takeaways from a grant-funded project with the board for future consideration. Because this is one of the first. I think we've had maybe one in the past through the Safe Routes to School program years back, but this is one of the first fully grant-funded sidewalk projects or infrastructure projects, for that matter, in the town. But the good news is it was part of the Downtown Neighborhoods Plan, which was done in 2014, and so this was a plan that the community, a sidewalk section the community said that they wanted. There's that white segment there. So the sidewalk, this segment here. So the sidewalk runs between Fallondale Road and Utah Drive, which is one entrance of Millbridge to past the Coldwater Mill entrance of Millbridge, and then a little bit kind of directly across from Utah Drive. And we said, okay, there's a CDBG grant fund available. The Union County is now an entitlement community, which means every year they will get an allocation of funding from HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And we took a look at what we had that would fall under the eligibility guidelines, which is based on income and some other criteria, applied for the grant and got it in 2018. And so it was 100% funded by the grant. That was a really great thing for the town as well. But the grant came with some requirements, and we had to do things through the federal procurement processes and through HUD's regulations, which are pretty thorough. So it definitely has some compliance costs, and what that translates into, in addition to added cost of the project, it also means added time for the project. So it's about a third of a mile long, and here's so it's a little more zoomed in. There's Fallondale at Millbridge, and then down here is Utah Drive. When this aerial was taken, and the Coldwater Mill Road had not been built yet, but now it's right here. So this connects Millbridge to downtown Waxhaw. The Downtown Neighborhoods Plan, even in 2014, estimated it would benefit 6,000 residents who could use that corridor. And so now you can come right out of Millbridge and head down to downtown Waxhaw. It also serves, of course, all the residents who are along Waxhaw Marvin Road who are adjacent to the sidewalk. Some of the takeaways I want to share with the board. So the approved grant budget through the county was $289,000, and again, it was not a match. That was direct, 289 to the town. We have the environmental review, the design, the right-of-way, and construction. And I broke out the percentages there so you could take a look at kind of what the balance of the different parts of the project were. Environmental review, very small. Design, very reasonable, right on target, what you would expect design to be in an infrastructure project like this. Then you have the right-of-way portion, which includes the cost both of hiring a right-of-way acquisition consultant, which was required by the grant. We had to use federal it's called the Uniform Relocation Act procurement guidelines, and they required us to have a process for getting a right-of-way consultant and a certain process for negotiating the easements. So that includes that cost and the cost of the easements themselves. So we paid the property owners for their both a permanent easement where the sidewalk actually is and will be forever, and then the temporary construction easement that we had to encroach upon their property for during construction, some damages for landscaping or landscaping impacts that were expected. And then the construction contract was ended up being $158,000. So it's a good thing, again, because the grant was, this money was passed through from the Housing and Urban Development to Union County to Waxhaw. So it's a good benefit for the Waxhaw citizens, but the lesson learned going forward is that staff would recommend that when we're pursuing these kind of grants that we have at least an 80, that at the minimum, the grant is an 80-20 grant, meaning whoever's funding it would pay 80% and the town would only pay 20%. And the reason for that is because if you look at some of these numbers, the right-of-way cost were, it was approximately $42,000 just to comply with the HUD guidelines that we would not have had to incur without this being a federal project. The construction costs were about $80,000 more than they would have been without the grant guidelines. We got some other bids just out of curiosity to see what it would be outside of the grant, and they came in around 80 or 90,000. So what that means is this is a good thing still because it was 100% funded. But if the grant was a 50-50 grant, it wouldn't have been, in our opinion, worth pursuing. So just something to keep in mind as the board considers grants for other things in the future, that when you're dealing with federal money, it's not free, as they say. Are there any questions on that project?
It's nice to have it done.
Thank
you.
It's done, and it's.
I've seen people walking on it already.
It's very encouraging when we see people walking.
It is. When you see them walking on it, that's a great thing. Thank you very much for that. Any other comments? Anybody else? Next step.
Next one is the TAP grant, another federal grant that we have. This one comes from Federal Highway Administration, passed through NCDOT, and so it is a downtown sidewalks grant. You probably hear it called out in the community. It's been going on since late 2016. We were awarded it. It took CRTPO and NCDOT about a year after that, though, to get it programmed into the state transportation improvement program. So really late 2017 is when we got going with design. It's parking. And so it proposes to add some parking along North Providence Street by shifting the current parallel spaces to angled. It will add some safety and traffic improvements throughout, which I'll share with you in a moment. Some signalized crossings for pedestrians, which will also help the vehicular traffic navigate downtown better as well. It's looking at overall pedestrian function and connectivity by connecting sidewalks where they don't currently connect. This is just one example here, a screenshot of the concept plans on McDonald Street. So currently the sidewalk ends at the McDonald House. Now it'll go all the way to the corner there. And then people will be able to go up north on North Broome. Some additional sidewalk connections on South Main to connect the Barnes Park all the way to the Mill on Main development. Improved access within Barnes Park as well through ADA improvements. Access to Barnes Park with improved crosswalk. A big marquee piece of the project is the East North Main Street pedestrian plaza, which I'll show in a second. And then bike safety and connectivity through some shared right-of-way markings on the road and some better locations and more robust bike racks. And then finally, it's outside of the grant funding, but we want to do it at the same time for obvious reasons when you're tearing up sidewalks, street lights as well, decorative street lights. Some of the key features of the grant, RRFB is called a rapid rectangular flashing beacon, and it looks similar to this, and we would propose to have it placed at the pedestrian, the overhead bridge there at North Providence or South Providence and East South Main. I think we all know that the flag system is challenging, and the crossing is used more and more, especially with the new developments on East South Main. As we did the pedestrian counts with NCDOT, this intersection was the one that rose to the level of a new signalized need. And what this does is it's not stopping traffic in the same way a red light does, but as a pedestrian activates it, it starts flashing, and it also will have a warning beacon a little further down the road in that curve there on East South Main, so that when the pedestrian activates it, the cars see it before they even see the pedestrian, that they would see a flashing. So all the research that we've got through DOT shows that this really does increase compliance with the crossing from the vehicle's standpoint, up to 80% improvements in the compliance with the crosswalk, and it definitely improves pedestrian safety there. Another big piece of the project that is this improvement, and this is just a concept plan. It's not going to look exactly like this, but basically extending the sidewalks out on East North Main, and converting to a one-way street to allow us to not have to sacrifice parking. And in fact, there'll be a net gain in parking along that whole block, I believe of about 9 spaces. So those are the two of the pieces of the project that I just wanted to highlight because we're pretty excited about those. Okay, here's the TAP grant budget, and this is where we get into some of the challenges that we've been facing, and kind of how we're trying to work through them. So the approved budget is $1,029,000, a little over $1 million, and it is a 50-50 grant. So this is the town's net would be $514,575. So we've got design here that we are approaching this number. We're calling it, we're at 100% design right now because we've got final plans. We're just working through DOT encroachment approval, but we've essentially spent $376,000 on design. The original estimate was lower than that, and some design costs came into play that we were not expecting in the way of designing the pedestrian plaza, and some surveying we did not know we were going to have to do to comply with CSX, and then some CSX review fees that we've incurred that really have driven up the design costs to where they are. And the next piece of this here, when you look at the budget, I'll skip right of way. The construction estimate, I say estimate because this is based on our engineer's estimate of construction costs based on the approved or based on the final plans we have. So still within the budget that we have until you start looking at right of way, because we're not sure what that number is yet. So we're at 885 out of 1,029,000 without right of way. What is the right of way we need? The only right of way we need is CSX. We don't need any private property right of way. We did our best to stay out of the right of way, so we're not encroaching on downtown property owners. So that the right of way is wholly CSX, and that's the part between Barnes Park on the north side of the road all the way to the mill on Main. And those costs will depend on the number that CSX comes back to. We have been coordinating with them since February of 2018. We finally got conditional construction approval in January, but they run their construction process and their right-of-way process completely separately. They've got a construction consultant that handles all that. They're called Arcadis, and then they do their real estate portion in-house. So we've got approval on construction, but it's contingent on right-of-way approval, which is where we are now. We've provided them everything they need, from surveys to we've recorded plats for them, and we've given them everything that they ever asked for, and the latest response we got was this week that they're reviewing them. So that's really the critical path in this project right now. I share this and being candid because I hate when I'm out in the downtown, and I'm sure you folks as well, I hear things like, oh, the grant, it stopped, or it's not going to happen. And I see how from a citizen's perspective, it might seem that way. It's been going on 4 years now, but it is happening. It is funded. We've got plans. It's just a matter of getting through this final piece here. And then once that happens, once we get the answer from CSX, how do we decide how much of the project can move forward within the budget? It's only the sidewalks here between, this is all we're talking about though, so it's not the whole project that's impacted by this. It's just starting at Barnes Park all the way to Mill on Main. The problem is because it's all in the same grant, we can't start building any of it until we have all of it approved. We're only requesting 8,500 square feet of permanent easement from CSX. That's the total amount for the 5-foot sidewalk. We've expended about $20,000 in compliance with CSX. They've estimated that their construction monitoring costs could exceed $100,000 for us. That's what their construction approval letter stated. And then the following numbers you're about to see are just a range, but it's what we've gotten a broker price opinion on it, and based on railroad right-of-way costs. And so these numbers are not meant to make people say, oh my gosh, but they're meant to say, this is kind of what we're up against, and we're going to need to hopefully get those numbers down, and if not, it's going to impact the extent of that particular sidewalk portion that we're able to complete within the grant budget. So that's where we are now with that. So let's pretend CSX doesn't exist for a second, and here's an estimated schedule. Because I know I get that question all the time too. What's the schedule? And it's a valid question, but it's hard for us to give you a confident construction start date because we don't have approval yet to build anything. So assuming that we had everything done from CSX within the next month, we could close out right-of-way in March. It takes about two months lead time with DOT to move to bid phase, and then another 3 to 4 months to be able to get from bid phase to construction phase. So this is a TAP grant schedule as a best case scenario. And again, that CSX piece is where we are. I know the town manager has been working hard with the higher ups at CSX to try to get this thing not only expedited, the approval, but also to try to get some a common sense approach about the cost of that right of way. It's a 5-foot sidewalk. That's all we're asking for. So that's where we are. I don't know if you have any other comments on that, manager or Matt.
Well, quick question as to, are we in jeopardy of any timelines that we can't meet because of their cooperation or not? How does that affect the grant?
We're not in jeopardy, not yet. We have until September of 2021. And even then, we could do a modified agreement with DOT to extend that if necessary. With all the funding challenges that DOT has, though, it's always just the longer it goes on, it's not ideal.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Very good. That's all I have. Thank you
That's all
very
I have.
much. Appreciate that.
Thank you very
That's a
much.
good
Thank you,
update.
Kurt.
I'd like to, I guess, wish you well. You're heading out.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for bringing that up, and I just want to thank the board and for your service. Thank the management of the town of Waxhaw. Thank the staff, and of course the people I've been fortunate enough to work with here in the town. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be here, and I really mean that. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Best of luck.
Okay, that's one more up here. We got Miss Dina. Come on up. Come on down.
Home stretch.
Welcome.
Y'all, an update on Park and Rec. We've had an interesting couple days, so we're going to go into our programming. So we've got our outdoor conditioning on Tuesdays. We had to postpone this morning because of the fields, but we'll be back and ready for next week. We have a youth program tomorrow night. We still have room in the class, partnering with the Cupcake Queen, Miss Tara. So please come and join us. We also have our Fit Club. They just finished up their session and going back to another session next week. So please join into that. And then, of course, our game day is the following week as well. We've got a new program, adult programming, with paint furniture. So you bring a piece of furniture, and we have an artist that will help you do a faux painting on that piece of furniture. So it's really cool. So if you're into, redoing something, refreshing up a piece of furniture, please join us for that class. And something really, really fun for us adults, it's the iFly. You actually get to go in this simulation and go flying. So we're doing a day trip, and we actually have a couple seniors that are going to come with us, so it's going to be cool. But we, through our surveys that we did with the master plan, adult programming was really high. So we're doing our best to try to get something, a little adventure. Next event coming up is our Blue Light Skate Night. So we're working with PD on this as well. And sign-ups for all events will be online with Rec Desk within the next week. Ms. Lisa's working extremely hard to get the whole year up, so it's easier for vendors and participants as well. Okay, so we had a little rain last week, and it caused a little bit of an issue with some of our parks and our trail system. But because we have such an awesome team, we are up and running again. There's a few areas that are still closed, but we're steady working on them. The areas that are open is Barnes Park is open, but we are going to have to redo some mulch because of the amount of water that came through there. Nesbitt is open. We do have areas that is marked off just because we're still checking all the equipment, but the park is open. The WA is working with us also to get the fields back together. The 12 Mile Creek Carolina Thread Trail at Prescott, and that's at Town Creek 2, that is now open. Definitely some team effort with Public Services helping us with that one. And then the areas that are still closed is the 12 Mile Creek nature area between Millbridge Parkway and the Suspension Bridge. As you know, that's majority of the water coming through there. So we have lots of trees down, lots of debris. Some of the footbridges got pulled up. So we've got the contractors already been out there assessing those, getting the bids on that. The Suspension Bridge, Alpine's coming out tomorrow, getting the assessment on it. So we are steady getting back, but that one's going to take a little bit longer to get back to 100%. But the rest of the trail areas are open. The Prescott and Town Creek is open. Town Creek area, the playground, we missed a little mulch, so we're going to get some more mulch in there and do an assessment on the playground itself just to double check everything. And then we're back to 100%. Again, a lot happened in a few hours. So we are diligently working to make sure that safety's first. Y'all hear me say that a lot. To make sure our parks are safe and our trails are safe. Any questions about that area right now?
Can I ask you, what sort of budget impact are we looking at on these kind of repairs?
We did have more structural repairs that we're going to have to do because the current was so strong. It wasn't like Florence. Florence kind of came up like this. This one came rushing in. So we're still assessing all those.
Okay.
It's probably going to be similar to that Florence, budget. But again, I'm getting all the vendors. We met with a lot Monday and today, and again tomorrow, to get those bids back so we can get a proper price for everything, if we can't do it in-house.
Okay.
Because we've done a lot in-house already, but we've had to rent equipment to, just get debris out of the, because we went fishing. It is what it is. So we got everything back that we could find, and then we're just now assessing what's left and what we need to repair.
Okay, thank you.
Question there.
Is there any way to minimize that damage or the impact of these rains?
So, my teammates and I are going to work on what's above and below us on the creek channel to kind of see what impacts are going on, because this has happened twice in 2 years. So we're going to explore that and try to figure out if there's any other external things happening that we're not aware of. That was kind of my first thing, this becomes a pattern.
You're
So we-
talking outside the town limits if possible as well, because that upstream drainage that comes to us could be affecting us,
We don't know.
obviously is.
So let's go ask our friends that are around us and see what's going on in their areas, and kind of figure out what our next steps are, to mitigate. 'Cause it was, as y'all know, it was a lot of water really, really fast. So that's just something we're gonna have to start thinking about.
Dina, just along those lines, is that something we have insurance for? That would be, you could put a claim in to fix that, or is those things not insurable?
No, we have insurance. So, the first thing that I learned from Florence is document everything. So, starting on Thursday, we started photographing everything, and then also documenting how fast the water was coming up and how fast it receded. Unfortunately, I was actually at a conference, and I didn't get back until Friday afternoon, but I spent Friday afternoon going through what the staff's already, Park Rec and Public Works has already went through, and then Billy and I spent pretty much all day Saturday, except when it started snowing here, and I was like, okay, let's pack it in. And then, but we got a lot of things documented on that end. That's one thing that we learned from that storm, and we were better prepared this time because we had the cones and the barricades that we learned from that first one, and signage and things like that, like the suspension bridge. So there's gates up on there on both sides. We didn't have that before to close it off. Now we have. We learned, I try to learn every time. So that's definitely, but again, this is still a learning process because this hit us pretty fast. So it's just, and we're already doing our game plan of debriefing with the other departments to kind of see where we can get better.
Along those lines, there may be some funds available because we shared in the declaration, the emergency declaration on Friday, so, or Thursday, I guess it was. We may be able to get some additional funding from help with the county.
Cross your fingers. Any other questions? Okay. As I said last time, we're still working on it. By the end of the month, I should have kind of like a report that has all the pros and cons, budget, what JARS is saying that they can contribute, and what would be the town of Waxhaw contribute. And then I'll give that lovely decision to y'all. And then y'all can, ask me more questions, and I'll have extra support, like documentation, so we can have all that together so we can have a good, clear discussion and what you would like to do for that event. Questions? Okay. And always, I'll leave you with our vision and mission. Professional parks is what we are always trying to provide. The bottom of that mission is safe environment for our citizens. That's what we've been doing for the last 5 days, is getting a safe environment for them to come out and play again. So that was a definitely team effort, because I wanted to give out kudos to my teammates behind me. it definitely took all of us to make this happen. It just wasn't the parks affected, it was other town streets, other facilities. We just get a lot of, highlight, because usually our pictures get on Facebook before anything else. So it's just one of those things. I wanted to say thank you to my teammates, and thank you for your support as always. Okay.
Great.
Thank you also.
Thank you. And thank you again, and kudos to you for setting the elevation on the restroom building high enough.
That's right.
Great, thank you very much.
Mayor, can I make a couple comments?
You may, thank you.
Thank you. Winter Storm Cade, obviously, they need to thank all the department heads for their work and the employees that were involved. It was a long day for them, and continues to be one that we deal with. While we were fortunate that no lives were lost, we did realize that we still need to do a better job coordinating and communicating, even just letting our employees know which roads are closed and things like that. So we are going to be meeting as a group with our communications staff to sort of debrief on that next week. And while we're continuing to work on the new emergency operations plan, but there may be things, and there probably are things that we can do in the interim should another event happen that will improve that communication and coordination moving forward. Lastly, I'll just piggyback on your comments with regards to Kurt. I want to thank him for his service to the citizens of Waxhaw. I know he will be sorely missed by our folks here in Waxhaw and all the employees he interacted with as a valued employee. In the interim, in his absence, we've delegated a couple of his tasks to some staff members, so the TAP grant will be under engineering. Orion will take over that project to carry it through, and then Max Thang will be the Main Street Advisory liaison and coordinating their efforts until we make another hire.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments, Attorney Buckley? Any other comments?
No comment, thank you.
Okay, very good. Okay, at this time, we have a need to go into closed session relative to the property acquisition of 4220 Waxhaw Marvin Road pursuant to NCGS 143-318.1185 to establish or to instruct the public body, self, or staff concerning the position to be taken by or on behalf of the public body in negotiating the price and other material terms of a contract or proposed contract for the acquisition of real property at the above-mentioned location, 4220 Waxhaw Marvin Road. So at this point in time, I'd like a motion to go into closed session. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
We're in. Hey, we're all in. At this time, I'd like to have a motion to reopen the regular meeting session. All in favor? Or a motion, rather? Go ahead.
So moved.
So moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Great. All right, we're back in. So unless there's any further discussion, any comment from anybody? Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Very good. All in favor?
Aye.
Done.
All right.